Hello, once again.
Hello, how are you? Eric, hi,
Hi.
sweetie.
He says, I'm fantastic. And Eric goes, Hi, sweetie. And then he
Aw,
like came up and kissed the screen.
aw, you silly boy. No, we were talking about mindfulness, so I thought it would be a good segue to start talking about technology. Now we are so obsessed with technology. It seems like we've even cocooned ourselves, texting and all that, not really interacting with people. So I'd like to know, is that a are there good aspects to that? Is it all bad? I mean, tell me, what can you tell me about our technology obsessed, social media obsessed world?
He says it's good and bad. There's reason for why we're experiencing this like numb state of mind. And then he literally just showed me everybody looking like zombies.
Yeah,
Like,
seriously.
yeah, they're just not awake most of the time, he says. At least if they're like this. Um, He says, well, the good in it is, he says it's very straightforward. And he's being real, like with his body movements and his gestures, he's very much being like a little boy, like how he holds himself. And like I can see his collarbones and he just
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
throws himself forward. And he says, it's very straightforward. He says it can connect you when you're not connected, but he's talking about distance, like geographical distance. So it's great if it's used in that respect.
It
You
makes
can
the world
connect to loved ones.
smaller. Yeah, it connects, like I'm Skyping with you. And I'm in Texas,
Yeah,
you're in Ohio, that sort of thing. Okay.
and he says there are so many benefits because being able to share views, to share understanding. There's so many benefits to it. You know, he says, think about how many times you jump online and you see an article or you want to read about something. So you get on the internet through your phone, through your computer. So social media and technology in itself has contributed greatly to our own enlightenment and evolving as mankind because information is so readily available. And just having that information available, he says, um, is expansive for people. People experience expansion. But there's also a big fat downfall, he says. um, he says one of probably the primary downfall is the way that it can be used to spread hate.
Mm.
Um, because that too can be just as strong a ripple effect as spreading love. So he says, he's so sweet. He goes, oh man, he's like, it's so messed up. He goes, think about this for a minute. He's like, okay, let's say somebody is sharing a post on Facebook, and that post is the post that they shared is about something negative, and then they share it saying, I want this to change in the world. Like, why can't this kind of thing stop? He says, but actually, they're just contributing to it.
I
It's
see.
backwards. It's like an illusion, he says. But anyway, the downfall is we forget to talk to each other. We forget to acknowledge each other's existence. Um, so it's funny because he's going to point me out. Like last night, I was on the couch on my phone, checking emails, just going through all my stuff on my phone. Kids were in bed, husband's watching TV right next to me. And I can feel my husband's energy, and he gets real pissy with me. Like, put that damn thing down. He's a farm boy. Like, he could care less about technology.
Mm.
And so I sat there and I asked myself, trying to be mindful. And I thought, what would I be doing if I didn't have my phone right now? I'd probably be having a conversation. I'd probably be engaging about whatever we were watching. Uh, and just, that bond would be strengthening.
Mm.
But instead, I had chose to be on my phone for that time. And that, allows that separation. So it was like, he's like, you're welcome. I love picking on you.
Yeah,
but,
it's
but
it's
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 just
amazing.
last night,
Oh, go ahead.
I was thinking about that just last night, how it does create so much divide Um, Erik says, he says, we don't even hold, and he's getting a really soft tone. He says, we don't even hold being present with somebody sacred anymore.
Mm.
He says, there are still some cultures in the world that just sitting together, being together is a sacred thing.
But
These are cultures that don't have.
Kim, you could have texted him, "I love you." Text
I
your
should
husband.
have.
There we go. Then you can have your cake and eat it too. But it is weird
Yeah.
how technology can both divide us and connect us.
Erik says it's all about the experience of what we're learning from it right now. We're very aware that it creates the divide,
Mm.
but where the bottom falls out, he says, is making the choice to be conscious enough and say, I'm going to choose this over my phone right now, or I'm going to choose this, being present, being physical. He says that's where the bottom falls out because we're aware that it creates the divide, but making the choice to
Do something
to
about it.
close that divide.
Yeah.
Yeah, or not. He says some people don't want to interact and they introvert very well through their technical gadgets.
Yeah.
Um, he says it serves its purpose, both good and bad.
Well, do you have any advice as far as, for example, children? When should we start allowing them to engage in with technology? How old should they be, or does it matter?
He says, well, he says that'll be up to the parental discretion, but he says you got to be smart about it. Sometimes, he says, think about what we're breeding. If we start really young and say, have at it, here's a phone, here's a tablet, play, do whatever you want, then they have access. And their little fingers just don't stop. And they could be exposed to things that they don't understand.
Yeah.
They could then begin to accept things that otherwise aren't accepted just based on what they might see on the internet. So he says that's where you have to use your own discretion and discipline to make that choice. But we are starting too young. He says, my opinion, we're starting too young.
Okay.
Because we're teaching them to rely on this. Here, have this phone. Here, have this tablet to fulfill their time rather than rely on this or this.
And go out and play. I mean, we use them as electronic babysitters very often,
Yeah. And he says it sort of deprives them from even knowing their own creativity.
Oh, that's true. But if they don't go out and play with their friends in the street or whatever, then they don't learn skills like conflict resolution, leadership, sharing, compromise, all those things that are just so important. You don't learn that by sitting at a tablet, playing Angry Birds or whatever.
Yeah, he's saying social skills and respect too. He says just out of love, you should show love and respect. If somebody comes to your house, but you don't even get your face out of your phone enough to say, "Oh, hey, I'm glad you stopped over." He says it's really important to keep that side of who we are. We're physical beings. We're spiritual humans, and that's the essence of who we are first. But we're forgetting that. It's like the technology takes us to a whole other place where we don't even acknowledge what's around us anymore. He says it's creating a major lack to just a divide. It divides us from knowing our own self. Just like you said, Mom.
That's true, yeah.
He says, just like you said, we don't even know what situations we're comfortable in anymore because when we're in that situation, most of the time we're checking our phone. So
we're not, are we being, so it robs us of our mindfulness? Being engaged in technology?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
so we're not like reviewing our inner landscape, our using tools of emotional honesty, evaluating ourselves and others and the environment and our situation, circumstances. We're not doing that when we're on Facebook.
Yeah, and he says people don't get over
those cute little kitty videos on YouTube. I can't stop.
He says don't get stressed out and thinking, oh man, that takes so much energy to be mindful all the time. He says it doesn't. Just observe yourself. Just be there. Just show up for yourself.
And with practice, I'm sure it gets easier. Well, do you think we should have rules? Like my number one rule is you cannot engage in technology at the dinner table. Of course, I text them to come downstairs for dinner, but but they can't obviously engage in that. Any other rules we should set for our children or ourselves?
He says, "Yeah, Mom, so I'll share because that's where he just drops off and points at me. So he's showing me a
For
memory just of a
you.
couple nights. I know, I feel like such an ass. But but two, I learned through the experience of it. So just the other night, my son was in his room playing his Xbox,
Mm-hmm.
and father-in-law stopped over, and my son didn't come out of his room to say, "Hey, Pap, thanks for stopping. How are you?" He didn't come out of his room the whole time. He didn't know Pap even stopped.
Mm.
So we were kind of like, "Buddy, you need to be more aware. You need to get off your game a little bit, and at least acknowledge when someone steps by to say hi." And so he wasn't like punished, but kind of helping him see
Be
that that's
aware.
important.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what Erik says is just respect others' presence with you. Respect that they're present with you. There's so much importance and value in that, he says. And put the phone down for 5 minutes and just respect that they're choosing to be there with you. Well, and then he goes, sometimes maybe they're not, but at least respect that coexistence. Um, get get the gadgets out of your face, he says.
So remember that the presence of another is sacred. That's the bottom line. And you have to ask yourself, do you want to violate that sacredness by ignoring them and whatever, or do I want to embrace that sacredness and engage in conversation or just sit in the presence of?
Exactly. He's getting real deep too when he's talking about this. He's going on and on. He says, hopefully you can recognize this in your own self, but in any other human, if you just take a quick minute knowing that God exists in them, isn't that sacred enough
Oh,
to stop and say hi?
yeah.
He says, just to be able to go a little bit deeper. He says, anymore, we're afraid it takes too much energy. We want the quick and easy and right now. He says, we're instant gratification people, and if it doesn't satisfy us right now, then our interest just goes. He says people just
Yeah.
can't stay interested.
So
But it's
God or Minecraft? God or Little Hopping Goats YouTube videos? Hmm. So
yeah,
hard.
yeah. He goes, "Gee, Mom." He's like, when you put it like that, hopefully they get the message.
I hope so. Anything else on what about limits, time limits for people? Should there be any of that? Kids or adults, for that matter.
Are you there?
There we are. I don't know what happened, but anyway, I just have one last question. I think. Um,
Okay.
uh, should there be any limits for adults or children as far as how many hours a day should be dedicated to technology and social media outside of the job?
He's
Obviously, in a job
Yeah.
situation.
Outside the job, he says 1 to 2 hours at max. He says you should spend your time living and being physical in the moment, present with everything around you. But the phones and the gadgets take you away from that. So he said you should have discipline and limit yourself.
And kids should probably not go on any social media or technology unless they've played outside for the day or done something outdoors, some sort of exercise and free play,
Yeah.
and
And he
or
says,
something creative, anything creative.
yeah, exactly. He says something to foster their own growth. He
Okay.
says, um, being outside, playing, being creative, painting, drawing, coloring. He says whatever, but something that fosters their own growth, allows their own creativity to still exist. So limit, if they've cleaned their room, if they've done something for themselves, then sure, fine, he says. But make sure they remember to connect to themselves and find that just as valuable as their games.
All right. That sounds good. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Kim.
You're so welcome. He says, anytime, Mama. He puts his hands on his hips and he's just like, anytime. So he's just
Aw.
being so animated and goofy today.
Hey, I got a visit from you yesterday. I felt the tingling, so intense tingling on my left leg. So thank you for that little visit. I said hi.
He's blowing you kisses. He's emotional when you say that.
Hmm.
So he's just saying thank you,
Come.
like for speaking of it, acknowledging it.
All right.
So
Well, come over tonight and sit in my lap, and we'll snuggle like we used to.
he says, call it done.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now,
So
now, millions of people know that. So, love you guys.
love you guys. Bye bye.
Bye.